Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this match video for Mud's mission taken from the website Royal Road. As always, I hope that you all enjoy this episode, and if you do, please consider supporting the channel. Also, all of these episodes will be available as a podcast on the various different podcast platforms. All the links will be down below. Chapter 73, Militia Mobilized. The partial experience that Mud collected from the few higher-tier beasts in the crowd was minuscule, but the sheer volume of enemies meant that he quickly added up. By the end of the hallway, the golem had collected enough experience to level its race once more, as well as making substantial progress towards the next level. As the crowd of Dalbers and the city officials waited for the great magician Magnus to cast an intricate spellwork to restore the collapsed staircase, Mud took time to examine the Akashic records. Name, Mud Golem. Level 9 Mud Golem. Level 4 Master Butler. HP 12 out of 13. SP 0 out of 0. MP 154 out of 260. Spell, Psionic, Force Bolt, Lesser Telekinesis, Paracosia, Skate. Home, Repair Structure, Board Structure, Kill Pest. Skills, 7, Detect Malice 2, Bodyguard 4, Climbing 4, Cooking Max, Domain Control 1, Etiquette Max, Hidden Weapon 6, Household Magic 2, Household Mastery 4, Mathematics 4, Psionics 3, Sneak Attack 6, Stealth 6, Service Max, String Manipulation 7, Torture 1, Unarmed Combat 9, Amorphous Form Rare, A Servant's Loyalty, Rare, Almanac, Unique. Status, Incomplete, Articulation Runes. A large volume of skill points were amassed. Taking a long view of things, Mud had considered a hoard of skill points to repeatedly advance the most useful skills. After all, they had appeared to be limited in availability, and Mud was confident it could overcome challenges that it currently faced with its current strength. The golem's recent one-sided defeat at the hands of Shin had crushed the naive optimism. More strength was required now if it was still to fulfill the master's instructions. Immediately perceiving that very jewel was another event that caused Mud to reconsider its stance and skill points, the reward for altering the blind spot removal. Based on the timing and context of receiving the reward, it appeared that the skill being accessed or used was a qualifier for receiving the reward. That being the case, Mud could potentially farm large amounts of skill points in the future. Within Mud's mind, plans slowly formed for great skill point farms, where sapients would be imprisoned and forced to learn useless skills that Mud would systematically design. Unfortunately, such grand plans were far in the future, and would require massive amounts of skill points. First, it would mutate the skills it already had to max level. So far, each such mutation had been thoroughly useful. Without bothering a second guess itself, Mud purchased the enhancements for cooking, etiquette, and service. Cooking skill mutated to taint food skill at level 1. Etiquette skill mutated into preternatural grace skill at level 1. Service skill mutates into empathic service skill at level 1. Once again, the mutation of the skill felt distinctly different from purchasing a new skill. Beyond simply gaining new knowledge, Mud felt as though he had unlocked a new avenue of control over the world itself. A shift had been taken in place of its very soul. The only skills purchased new from the record which had felt similar was rare skill, Amorphous Form. Already, large chunks of stone floated up from the maw of the dungeon, merging together in the shape of a spatial staircase. Mud didn't have much longer to take care of his personal business before the great magician Magnus finished his restoration of the dungeon entrance. For now, more magic skills would likely be a waste. Mud already didn't have enough time to properly meditate on the ideals it already possessed. Learning more ideals would simply stretch the focus even further, resulting in having many weak magics. Mud would much rather have fewer but more powerful magic. Instead, it searched for the available rare skills which might be useful. Skill name, Substance Integration. Requirements, amorphous body composed primarily of a single homogeneous material. Division, rare. Amorphous body and the ability to survive losing half of body mass. Consume malice, rare. Marked for death by a large organization. Only 3 rare skills were available for purchase, and the third one was concerning, presumably the requirement related to the priest trying to smite Mud. The column turned its head towards the nearby head priest, who was currently healing small wounds on a few of the delvers had suffered during the initial charge. It seemed that he had given up on getting mud for the time being, likely due to the Delvers Association's protection. Mud diligently checked the description of the available rare spells. Skill, Division, Rare. Allows the amorphous lifeform to continue controlling parts of its body that have been split off from the main mass. Damage is still received from such wounds. Skill, Consume Menace, Rare. Feed on negative emotional energy of those who think of you. All three skills appeared useful. Even the actual purpose of Consume Menace was unclear. Without further hesitation, Mud purchased the three skills. Novus nervously fiddled with the straps on her leather armor, remaining in the back with the other melee-focused delvers. She had witnessed the power of Mud. While the combat abilities of the arena had been impressive, the casual ease with which he slaughtered the denizens of the dungeon was breathtaking. Billowing clouds of strange yellowish gas had spread forward from Mud as they made their way down the hallways. Each giant caterpillar caught in its path was quickly reduced to a shriveled corpse. With the hordes of the weak monsters cleared, the other mages easily picked off the now isolated high-tier monsters. Mud's attacks were certainly not the most powerful, but in terms of total kills he was without question a top contributor. Around a quarter of the way down the hall, a fire-using mage had gotten agitated by Mud stealing the glory. In an attempt to keep up, he had increased the fire magic beyond his ability to properly control, nearly burning some of the surrounding delvers. A sharp reprimand from Leader Ghoul on him back into control, and he sulked the rest of the way down the tunnel. Perhaps the greatest difference between Mud and the other delvers was his professionalism. Without an eye for glory, he simply did the task in front of him. He didn't push beyond his capabilities, or grandstand, or gloat. He merely continued to do his job steadily, exactly how a delver should work. Novus was growing more optimistic about working with the creepy, silent construct. Sure, he looked like a spectre of death and was cursed with blasphemous existence by the church. That was bad, but on the other hand, he seemed professional and clever. Working for him would likely be very lucrative. The swordswoman looked down at Mud as Magnus finally completed his spell, restoring the stone staircase. A short time after they arrived at the dungeon's infamous mouth, Mud had begun staring off into space. By the looks of it, a record trance. Perhaps he had gained a level while clearing the tunnel, mused Novus. Hopefully, he would stop being distracted by the record when they actually entered the dungeon. Nothing was more dangerous than a foolish delver taking his eyes off of the fight to take a peek at his HP and MP, or distracting himself with a bull theorizing only to be ambushed. Many amateurs died from such mistakes, or so her master had told her. Thagi patted the old man in orange robe, who had restored the staircase, then turned towards the delvers. "All right, everyone. We'll be sweeping this place as quickly as possible, but stay safe. Again, do not go below your own level of safety. Whoever is the weakest person in your group, only to go to the depth that they are comfortable with." Some groans came from the delvers at this comment. Foolish, thought Novus. Going beyond your depth and hoping your teammates would make up for it was an easy way to get everyone killed. At the same time, Mud began moving again. With a familiar, monotone voice of a young boy again filled her mind. Since she had gotten to know the curious construct, it now felt considerably less terrifying. "We will begin on the first floor. If we find it too easy, we will proceed to the second. We will go no deeper than the second floor. Do any of you oppose this plan?" "No, that's perfect." Novus agreed immediately. Next to her, Jabrax nodded vaguely and made a light sound. Cobb shrugged. Whatever. I don't want to work too hard anyway. Novus scowled at the scarred man. If there was anything about working under Mud that made her unhappy, it was working with this man. Something about him just felt off, like he was constantly up to something. He acted as if he was insane, but to Novus it came off like a mask, a tool that he used to hide his true intentions from others. Heedless of her concerns, Mud advanced towards the staircase, followed by the retreating backs of Thagi and the guard captain down the newly repaired stairs. Quickly reaching the bottom of the long spiral staircase, Novus was greeted with a sight of pulverized and burnt caterpillar corpses. A foul, chemical smell of worms' acid mixed with burning bug flesh filled the enclosed space. An urge to vomit crawled up her throat again, but she swallowed it down. Nervous, you'll be in the front and focus on blocking the enemies. Cobb and Jabrax, you'll take a position to the right and left and kill enemies with your weapons. I'll remain at the back and attack when an opportunity is open. I will crawl on your body in combat. That last bit was a little strange, but the rest seemed to be a reasonable tactic to Novus. Taking up the suggested formation, the group proceeded down the tunnel, picked arbitrarily by Cobb. What followed was a one-sided massacre of monsters. The group's coordination was excellent, due largely to the constant relaying of information by Mud. Somehow, Mud was able to keep everyone informed of the entire battle situation at all times, and he reacted immediately to any newly arriving enemy. Even when the group stumbled upon a corpse worm, it was swiftly defeated by the coordinated assault. After nearly an hour of slaying enemies, the group took a break to catch their breath at Cobb's suggestion. Strangely, despite his excellent leadership ability, Mud seemed legitimately surprised by the concept of, taking a break. He quickly granted the request, however, claiming he understands the human biology is limited by functionality. While the group waited, Mud again spoke to them. Our combat ability is suitable. We will proceed to the second floor. End of chapter. Chapter 74. Myth. Tier 2 is the stopping spot for most individuals who do not wish to risk their lives in pursuit for glory, or who are not wealthy enough to afford alternatives. At this stage, the danger of humping ramps up significantly. I assume that most of you here are at least at this rank. Should one decide to make a career out of killing, reaching Tier 3 is often not overly difficult task. Magical beasts have only evolved a single time and are often still inexperienced enough to kill easily if their weaknesses are known. For the ever-present underbelly of society, killing civilians is a favored method of easy advancement. As a result, the majority of the world's soldiers, criminals, and delvers fall into this category. This is also the point when many give up on further advancement, having already gained the tools needed for an easy life and having no desire to go further expose themselves to risk. Tier 4 is the realm where only those who kill, dedication, perhaps more bravery than sense. According to data collected by Delvers Association, only 1 out of every 10,000 sapiens will ever reach this point. It is not for the lack of trying, however. The death rate for Tier 3s is simply too incredibly high. Tier 3 sapiens have a stronger average lifespan than other tiers. Those few who have managed to reach Realm 4 have proven their prudence, however, and often go on to live long and productive lives. Lecture by the Tiers by Professor Sitio. Mud had decided the group was suitably rested and slowly began their way towards the downward stairs, clearing monsters as they moved. On several occasions they made contact with other parties, but moved past each other without incident. Before long they arrived at the downward slope towards the second floor. Mud and Jabrax had no difficulty travelling down the steep incline, but Novus was forced to crawl backwards down the slope on all fours, a sight which was met by mocking laughter from Cobb. He used a rapid movement skill to run down the slope in an instant. As they reached the bottom, they found the landing already cleared, the slowly dissolving bodies of corpse worms showing that another group had recently passed through. As Novus finally reached the bottom of the ramp, Mud approached the swordswoman. Novus, your skill is not sufficient for enemies on this floor. While climbing to her feet, the girl balked at the rather blunt assessment of her skill. Although it was upsetting to hear, she couldn't argue against the point. Compared to everyone else in the party, her skills were certainly lacking. Cobb and Mud seemed to be of a similar strength, and Jabrax was clearly holding back, being well stronger than either of them. Currently, she was the weak link. I understand. Do you want me to move back or just guard the rear, or carry your equipment? Novus asked solemnly, avoiding eye contact with the golem. That is correct, the girl winced. You will be carrying my sword. It will improve your combat ability to the extent that you will be useful. Novus blinked in surprise. Was Mud's sword enchanted? Even if it had some imbued with some ideal of improving its cutting ability, it wouldn't make her better at using it. The girl put those thoughts aside and decided to trust the advice of a party leader. Reaching out her arm, she grasped the sword which now floated through the air towards her. "Hi there, I'll be your dance partner from now on. My name is Ego, nice to meet you." "What?" Novus looked around the room rapidly, but couldn't find the source of the voice. Things proceeded as planned after Mud gave the sword to Novus. As the golem had predicted, Ego was able to make up for the human girl's lack of skill by subtly adjusting the attack angles, as well as improving her attack power by modifying her weight during strikes. As for her shield use, Mud was able to split his focus through telekinesis to move the shield to place where she was open to attack. Puppeteering the follower so directly like this was a new experience for Mud, and was more difficult than coordinating with Ego. As Mud learned the methods of directing the pet's human's every action, it awakened a new aspect on the ideal of control. With a level increase, a new spell was learned, Hallucination. It appeared to be a more complex version of Paracosia, allowing the visual and tactile sensation to accompany the spell. Unfortunately, the spell was not perfect. Images would just display exactly as they formed within Mud's mind. As a result, many details would be left out and the aspects simplified. Holding every single detail needed to make a perfect, realistic depiction of a three-dimensional object within its mind at the same time was simply not possible for the golem. It lacked the required processing power. At best, a convincing illusion of small rock was possible. Larger illusions would be entirely unconvincing. A bit of experimentation using the humans also revealed another flaw in the spell. If the target knew that it was an illusion, then it was trivial for them to banish the spell. When Mud informed them that it was using the spell, or tried to make a large object, they were able to immediately see through it. When Mud did not warn them about using the spell, things were more successful. Mud was able to convince Cobb that he'd suddenly gone blind for a few seconds before creating an illusion of pure black sphere around his head. Once he realized what had happened, he regained his sight and laughed it off, claiming that it was a pretty good prank. Overall, the spell was too unreliable to use as a serious method of attack. Instead, Mud used it another way, constructing a carefully planned design. Mud created a display containing a feed of tactical information to his party members. After some advice from the allies and several iterations, the Mud illusionary tactical heuristic was finalized. All display elements were slightly transparent, and the light blue shade not so would be distracting. The bottom left of the circle, which displayed the relative position of all known hostiles as red dots. The person receiving the data depicted the dot in the center. Everyone in the party, with the exception of Jibrax, granted access to the Akashic records, allowing Mud to include the live feed of important data such as health, mana, and spira in an unobtrusive manner. Jibrax had refused access to her record, claiming to have disconnected herself from the Akashic. The human seemed somewhat surprised by this information, but didn't comment on it. Apparently, splitting from the Akashic wasn't unusual enough for them to ask questions about it. There didn't seem to be any apparent advantage to such a choice to Mud, but the golem assumed that it was missing something, or subject for later research. Despite its complexity, the MITH didn't make up too much of Mud's concentration. With the class levels, Mud's mental abilities had improved greatly since its creation. Mana costs were now low enough that Mud could still regenerate a full mana between fights by simply not creating the MITH when outside of combat. Although the class had made this a useful tool possible, Mud was still determined to spend the next level of its species. The reason was because the short conversation it had had with Jibrax the last time that they were inside the dungeon. When asking about why the giant caterpillar had changed into a different species, Jibrax had revealed that when a soul amassed enough power, the large transformation could overtake their bodies. Specifically, level 10 in a species would qualify Mud for a change. In other words, it only needed one more level. And that level would come soon. With all the corpse worms and groupers kidding on the second floor, Mud was extremely close to leveling. Unfortunately, this group entered a small opening with two paths merged. The golem's plans were delayed. In the small room formed the intersection of several tunnels stood a group of tall delvers, a woman wielding daggers, and two older men, and a metal armor with a sword and shield, and a younger man wearing casual clothes and wielding a thin sword designed for thrusting. While Mud had never interacted with them, it recognized the group as delvers it had seen in the association pub. and the man with the thrusting weapon had been in the VIP section. As they had done before, Mud made its way to pass the new group. The man in casual clothes, a pair of tight-fitting black pants, and an extremely loose button-up white shirt stepped in his way. "Stop for a moment. I'd like to chat." End of chapter. Chapter 75. Murder. Mud stopped immediately in the noble-looking man's order. The man looked down at the golem and smiled. "You're that fellow executioner, Mud, from the tournament. That priest called you a construct. Interesting, very interesting." While their stances appeared casual, Mud noted that the members of the group stood in locations that would allow them to intercept any attacks on the young noble. "I happen to know a thing or two about constructs. My father dabbled in enchanting, you know. Clap your hands." As instructed, Mud snapped together his two muddy paws. Placing a hand on his head, he let out a short laugh. "It's true! Oh heavens, it looks like my luck is good tonight. My own golem, and free of charge." A blur quickly passed the noble's neck, and a moment later a fine scarlet line appeared along his throat. A gargled scream left his mouth as he clutched his hands on his neck, trying to slow the blood flow. Beside Mud, Jibrax licked the dropped blood from her middle finger. A casually dressed man stumbled back, and his two shield-bearing bodyguards placed themselves between him and the group. Jibrax breathed a puff of purplish-red gas towards them, but the left guard dispersed it with a wave of his shield. Shocked by the sudden shift of battle, Novus fumbled to lift her weapon and fight its stance. Cobb, by contrast, immediately leapt to attack, circling around the guards and swinging his wide arc towards the noble. His attacks were deflected by the daggers of the enemy team's female scout, and the two were soon locked in a rapid melee combat, steel and sparks flying. As tiny wounds began to form across Cobb's chest, his hyena laugh soon echoed through the room. Weaving easily between the attacks of the two shield breakers, Jibrax kept them at bay with rapid unarmed strikes. Behind them, the noble, still clutching his bleeding throat with one hand, used the other to extract a pouch and quickly drink a shimmering rainbow-colored potion. He finished the bottle, and the bleeding slowed to a stop. By now, Novus finally got a firm grip on Ego and moved to assist Jibrax. "Why are we fighting these guys? What's happening?" "Save your questions for after we're done. Shut up and fight," hissed Jibrax, grim reply. With a look of concern on her face, Novus did as instructed. As the assistance of Ego, she was even able to strike a blow to the shield-bearer's shoulder. Finally, releasing his throat, the noble forced a croaking voice out of his mouth. "Golem, I order you to—" His instructions were cut short by Mud finally strike. Since the beginning of the conflict, Mud had been amassing energy for a force bolt. Considering the strength of the equipment and its opponents, Mud estimated that it would not be a fatal attack. Mud had amplified the power as high as it thought it was possible without being instantly fatal. If the attack left him dying, it would still be fine as long as somebody else finished him off. The force bolt struck the right swordsman's shield directly with the force of a cannonball, rocketing him backwards and directly into the noble. Their tangled bodies soon crashed into the cave wall behind them, leaving the pair sprawled heap. Momentarily distracted by the blast, the remaining shield-bearer was struck down by the weight-increased overhead strike from Ego. The scout, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, attempted to disengage and flee, but found the passage outblocking by an unseen force. Jibrax grinned in satisfaction, and attacked her simultaneously with Cobb. Soon over, she was overwhelmed. With the rapid melee, and the enemy group lay unconscious on the floor. "So you want to explain what that was now?" Novus looked wearily at the blade in her hand, now stained with the red blood instead of green of monsters. "We're not done yet." Walking over to the unconscious body of the noble, Jibrax reached down. With a swipe of her hands, his neck was split open and a river of blood flowed out. "What are you doing?" Novus released her sword and dropped to kneel next to the body of the bleeding noble. Desperately, she tried to block the bleeding with her hands. It was useless. "Oh, he's dying! You killed him! Why? Why?" Tears flowed freely from her eyes and crimson gushed between her fingers. "Why? Isn't it obvious?" Cobb leaned casually against the wall, wiping the blade of cloth. That rich kid knew something the boss wanted to keep secret, something that would be dangerous if it got out. Novus looked up furiously towards Cobb. "You can't just murder somebody to keep a secret." I think you mean we, little girl. You fought right beside us. Cobb smiled mockingly down towards the tearful swordsman. I didn't think that you would kill him. Cobb shrugged exaggeratedly. Oh, so you just attack people with a sword without meaning to kill them, so you can go crying to the god about this. You'll be put to the block just the same as the rest of us, you know. Novus's face blanked. All light seemed to vanish from her eyes as she looked down at slowly paling corpse below her. Slowly, Jibrax went around and killed the remaining 3 guards. This time, Novus did not protest. She simply sat there, face blank. Eventually, she did move, to vomit to the one side. Again, with that, you need to build some backbone or you'll never survive in this business, you know. Cobb patted the girl on the back and helped her to her feet. Already, the dungeon began to dissolve the 4 bodies. Mud moved to loot them, but was stopped by Cobb. Whoa! Don't take anything. That's a rookie mistake. It can be traced back to you easily. Just let the dungeon eat it. Everyone will think they got killed by a monster. Jibrax nodded in agreement. He's right. That rich kid had some nice stuff on him. It's a shame, but it's not worth the risk. Mud backed away, following their advice. Instead, he headed towards another tunnel. We will continue hunting. Jibrax looked with a twisted expression towards Novus. I'm not sure if this one is up to it. She looks pretty spooked. Yes, that's a problem. Mud turned towards Novus, although she was now standing, and a listless look had marred her face. Unfortunately, Mud did not have the skills in psychology or leadership at this time. Only one easy solution occurred to the golem. Weaving its mind manner, the golem once again cast the spell that made her more susceptible to influence, then spoke to her. Novus, killing those humans was required. It was for our own safety. You don't need to be upset about it. I don't need to be upset about it, Novus slowly repeated back, a slight slur in her voice. If they left here alive, we would all be in danger. They were going to attack us. This was just a preemptive strike. Right, we didn't do nothing wrong, Novus mumbled back. I always have your best interest in mind. You can always trust me. I can always trust you. Some light seemed to come back in her eyes. Satisfied with its work, Mud released the spell that it cast on Novus. Are you ready to fight some more monsters now? Yes, I can still fight, sir. I'm sorry I hesitated back there. I won't let it down again, sir. Novus looked warily towards Mud, seeming to be expecting something. Mud remembered its order some time ago, and not disappoint her. Was she going to be disappointed if Mud didn't say the right thing now? After thinking about it for a short time, Mud finally had an idea. You did fine for the first time. Just do better than the future. Yes, sir. She seemed pleased with that, so they proceeded. With the situation resolved, the group continued to hunt monsters for a while longer. Eventually, the long-awaited event happened. Mud reached level 10 in Mud Golem. As the level took effect, Mud immediately felt a new sensation. Its soul seemed to boil with strength, unable to contain the power now packed tightly within it. With just a bit of effort, Mud knew a great change would be made. However, that change would likely not be instant. Like the evolving giant caterpillar, the evolution would mark a time of increased vulnerability. A safe place was needed for this ascension. Although it could have had the party watch over its body while it transformed, there were too many unknowns. Instead, it would be wiser to perform the change at a truly secure location. Turning towards the party, Mud sent a message. We will return to the surface and make for the Sithlar estate. End of chapter. Chapter 76. Mansion Mysteries. In every dark place, in every shadow crept in tiny forms. Before the signal could be let out, half the population lay already cold. Later, men would come to learn the cause of the disaster, to be but an incompetence of one man, tasked to light the torches which kept at bay the things in the low places. He chose instead to drown himself in a strong spirit. Why were not further precautions taken? It's an easy thing to say with hindsight. That a single man's foolishness should doom an entire city seems madness to us now. But why should they change a system which had worked for 100 years before? Even as the alarm went up and roused the defenders, it was already too late. Chaos reigned in the streets, and no fewer than a few crashed and stampeded to flee. A fire took hold in the slums, raging out of control. Some argued that it should be let to burn, the light of the flames serving to ward against the insidious darkness. Those few with strength to fight back were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. It was said that the leader in the town, a wise man and an ancient beast, died entwined with the corpses of the dungeon's most powerful denizens. Many hoped that respite of daylight, but few made it to that much-desired destination. With the rising of the sun, those who remained fled. Some years later the town was reclaimed. Through much toil and bloodshed, the kingdom's best, the creeping things, were pushed back, and fortifications built anew. Much more care was put into the design of the lights this time. Also, I hear, I myself have not been returning to that place, my place of birth. Even now, I have not forgotten that night. Even now, I feel fear at the sight of my own shadow. Excerpt from The Fall of W.R.E. The group ascended to the left dungeon without incident. Novus fought with renewed fervor. After each battle, she would seek approval in Mud's from words. As it made no difference to the golem, it began rating the girl's performance on a sliding scale. When rated highly, she showed signs of joy. When rated lowly, she showed signs of depression. Mud was slightly concerned by the rapid mood swings Novus was now displaying, recalling the risk of mental deterioration from the influence of the spell that had now cast upon the girl twice. When offered, the other members of the party quickly refused to receive the same rating service. Ego did agree, but on the condition that she always be rated at the highest possible score. Like so, the group quickly made its way up the stairs and out into the dungeon fortification. There, having already returned from their work, stood the city council of Gartheus, locked in a heated conversation, feeling no desire to engage in troublesome conversations at the moment. Mud directed the group in a wide arc around them. Thankful to not be called out to, the group went their separate ways. Before leaving, they made plans to regroup the following morning. "This is terrible. This is well outside our calculations." A heavily sweating and unhealthy man struggled to loosen the collar of his uncomfortably white formal jacket. The mayor of Gartheus, Guy Fallow. Thuggy Ghoul nodded sharply. His opposing black armor covered the dried remains of the green blood. "I told you something like this could happen if we closed the dungeon early." Fallow shook his head vigorously and rubbed a nervous sweat from his forehead. "No, this is well beyond even the worst projections you gave me." "I agree. This is not merely the result of not clearing the dungeon for a few days." The great magician Magnus hobbled his way into the conversation. "So that says the king's dog. Of course, you would want to deflect blame." Thuggy Ghoul eyed the newcomer suspiciously. "Well, unfortunately, I have to agree with you. This is odd. I also found something at the bottom floor, a strange artifact." Beside him, a beautiful female mage, Guard Captain Algar, was held up a geometric object. A 12-sided polyhedron, roughly the size of a melon, made of a dull black stone, each 5-sided face covered in a scrawling red rune script. Although it appeared to be made of stone, Algar held it far in front of her without need to rebalance her stance, displaying how unusually low weight. The man-made contrivance in a dungeon, and it wasn't eaten. That alone is strange. Magnus leaned over to the object and rubbed his bald head, smacking his lips a few times. Eventually, he stood as near to upright as his ancient body would allow. "Right, this is certainly an enchantment. I have no idea what it does. It's too advanced for me." "Enchantment too advanced for the great magician." A worried look twisted Guy Fellow's face. "There is only one explanation. I really don't like it." Everyone present turned to look at the same direction, east. Though the bank building blocked their sight, they all had the same building in their mind. Outside the city gates, past the slums, and up a short trail through the woods, the home of the only man who could have made this device, and likely the man truly responsible for this day's disasters. After returning to his domain, Mud immediately proceeded into the basement along with Jibrax before beginning the species ascendance. There was one task the golem wanted to complete. Turning towards the demon, Mud asked a question that had been on his mind. "Jibrax, is there another room below this one?" The demon scowled deeply, annoyance clear on her face. Slowly, as though the words were being forced out of her mouth, she replied, "Yes." As Mud became more familiar with his domain, a certain peculiarity became apparent to it. The shape of Mud's domain appeared to be a sphere, centered around the middle of the first floor of the mansion. Even the dirt below the lawn was included, so long as that it was within the sphere. There was, however, a large gap in the domain, an area that Mud could not sense inside of, the being on the other area directly below the basement. At first, Mud had not noticed this discrepancy, having never chosen to look there. Only by chance, when it decided to check every part of its domain while waiting for its fight with Susie, had it noticed the discrepancy, and now its suspicions had been confirmed. "Show me how to access the sub-basement." Jibrax grumbled, but did as instructed. Walking to a nondescript stretch of stone wall, she traced an intricate symbol into the tip of her finger. After a moment's delay, the section of wall lowered to reveal stairs going deeper into the depths of the mansion. With the way open, Mud's domain quickly folded down the stairs, completing its spherical shape to the best it could. Certain walls remained impermeable, but Mud quickly understood the general layout of the lower floor. Finding nothing below that required its immediate attention, Mud decided to put off the exploration for the time being. A feeling of tightness in its soul constantly clawed at its attention. It had put the matter off for long enough. It was time to ascend. "Jibrax, protect me in the house during my transformation. Use your judgment." Crawling through the door in the sub-basement, Mud pressed the nearby switch, causing the door to close behind it. Alone and hidden at the top of the stairs to the sub-basement, Mud concentrated its will. As it focused on the desire to evolve, the expected aid of the Akashic record appeared. "Would you like to evolve?" With the thought Mud accepted, immediately power began to overflow from Mud's soul, infusing every part of its body. The golem was a muddy flesh boiled and churned, warped, and the wild forces flowing through it. A strange euphoria filled Mud's mind, mixed with a stinging pain. For the first time in its short life, the golem lost consciousness. 4 of the most influential figures in the city of Gortheus climbed the twisting forest path, while Ghoul, Magnus, and the head priest Decitium showed no signs of fatigue. Fellow was clearly wounded by their pace. "Can you slow down a bit?" Mayor Fellow managed to croak out between gasping breaths. The others ignored him. Fellow smiled slightly at the abuse. Before long, the group arrived at their destination, the home of the great enchanter, Sithla. Wasting no time, Ghoul began slamming on the door. "Sithla, you old goat, get out here. You have some explaining to do." After a short time of knocking, the door was opened. Standing behind the door was not Sithla, to nobody's surprise. Instead, the great enchanter's niece, Jibrax, stood there, looking worried. "Yes, what business does the city council have with my uncle?" "It is no concern of yours. Bring Sithla out immediately. We need to talk to him personally." Leaning forward, Thagi radiated an aura of bloodlust. "Now!" Shrinking back in terror, the girl nodded rapidly. "Yes, sir, of course, sir. I'll go get him. You can just wait in the side room there." Pointing hastily to the door, Jibrax ran away and down the stairs into the building's basement. Taking the girl's directions, the group proceeded to the indicated room, finding several mismatched chairs and sofas arranged around a small coffee table. Pushing down their unease, the group sat down and relaxed on the surprisingly comfortable seats. After a short wait, a familiar voice called into the room. "So, what's so important that you feel the need to call an old man away from his hobbies, eh?" Rounding the corner of the door stood the elderly-looking man in an orange robe. End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting the author from the link down below. Otherwise, if you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, like liking, subscribing, and possibly even becoming a patron. Otherwise, the easiest way would be to share. And until the next video, I hope that you all have a good one, and I'll see you then. Cheers.